Okay, this is my stepfather, Ron Tannenbaum, and we're doing a life history interview with him because there's many things that we do not know about him. He's an interesting person. So the first question for you, Ron, is where and when were you born?
I was I was born in Chicago, Illinois, September 25th, 1942, in the middle of World War II. And my only claim to fame is that my mother and father were married on Pearl Harbor Day, the actual Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 1941. And if you calculate the gestation period of a human fetus, it's possible that I was conceived on a day that will live in infamy. And that's my only claim to fame.
So we can blame you for the war, right?
Well, you can blame me for certain elements of the war. Unfortunately, my parents divorced about a year after I was born, I think sometime in '43. And I was an asthmatic child, and it was the doctors felt that my asthma was getting critical enough that I needed to leave Chicago, or I might not live very much longer. And so my mother, with the help of my father, we moved to Arizona. And my mom worked in Phoenix, and I lived in the Children's Retreat in Arizona, the Prescott, Arizona, for a few years. And I started kindergarten there, and then I moved. For some reason, my mother moved me to St. Joseph's boarding school in Tucson, Arizona, and I lived there for a year and a half. I can't remember. And then.
So you were an only child then, completely.
Yeah, my brother was an only child. Yes.
Oh, you have a brother?
No, I have. That's a joke. I have a stepbrother from my mother's third marriage, Rick Tidrick, and he's a really terrific person, and we played together when we were kids. He was about 5 years older than me, but anyway, my mother went through another marriage while I was in these institutions, and then she married Larry Tidrick, and we moved to Phoenix, and she was no longer a working mother. She stayed at home with me, and we lived in several apartments in a number of houses, and at one point we moved near his ex-wife, Larry's ex-wife, and Rick and I played together because we were. It was very close. It was in the same neighborhood, and I spent many wonderful hours roaming the orange and lemon groves of Phoenix, Arizona. There were all around our neighborhood. There were groves of citrus trees of various kinds, and we would go up and we'd build forts in the trees. And of course, the owners, weren't particularly happy with us, but they never chased us out of the groves. We were always able to. It was like a little forest, It was just. But anyway, so I lived in Phoenix for a number of years, and then my mother and Larry Tidrick broke up, and we went to live in Palos Verdes, California. My mother got some money from a very close friend, and she was able to go to a beauty school and become a beautician. And in California, you have to go to school and do some classroom stuff, and then some lab stuff where you actually have hands-on, And she did that, and she got really good grades, and she passed the state examination with very high grades. And she went on to work for a guy in Palos Verdes. He had a beauty shop, and she worked for him for a number of years. And I went to Malagacova Elementary School, which was located on a peninsula in Palos Verdes. The peninsula overlooked the ocean. There was a 200-foot drop of the cliff, and the elementary school was right on the edge of the cliff. They had some fencing, so none of us stupid kids would fall off the cliff. And I spent 2 years, my 7th and 8th grade there, and it was a beautiful. The school was Spanish colonial, adobe looking, but it was actually real cement and plaster, but it looked like adobe. And you could look out the window of your classroom out over the ocean. It was a remarkable experience.
How did anybody get any schoolwork done with the ocean right there?
Well, they let us out to play, and there was a huge grass lawn on 2 levels, and we'd play football and baseball and tetherball and volleyball. We'd run back and forth, and they'd let it get us out of our system. So we went back to class. We were worn out and ready to study. But anyway, I graduated from Algoco Elementary School, and my mom and I moved to Redondo Beach, and we stayed there for a little while.
And so she was single at this time still?
She was single at this time, that's correct. And my mother was single. And we lived in an apartment, a little apartment complex about a block from the ocean. And so in the summertime, before school started, me and my friends would go out down to the beach, and we would play on the beach, would ride the waves and do all kinds of fun stuff from that beach, come home and exhausted by the end of the day, and the next day we'd go back out to the beach. We did that. We had kites too. In the daytime, the land heats up at about 10 or 11 o'clock. The land heats up, and the cool ocean air comes into the land, and and the wind was like about 15 to 16, 17 miles an hour, just steady, and it was a steady wind, and we'd let our kites out. We wouldn't even have to run. We just let our kites out, and they would float up there, and then we'd tie a stake in the sand, and we'd go play, and the kite would sit there all day long, it wouldn't move. and then when in the evening, when the land started to cool off, we'd reel the kite back in and carry it home. But
so this was like high school age kind of stuff?
This was high school. I went to Redondo Union High School for a semester, and then my mother bought a beauty shop of her own, she started. It was a two-person shop. She'd hired one other lady to work with her, and her beauty shop was somewhere near Hawthorne Boulevard in Torrance, California, and she bought a house in Torrance on Anza Drive, and it was a track house. All the houses looked the same, but and we enjoyed a wonderful time there. She had a boyfriend named Bernie Jones, who was had a small band, and we'd go see him to perform at the Plush Horse, and he was on a television show called Polka Parade that he would play his saxophone, his clarinet, and his flute an hour every Sunday evening, and sometimes we'd go see him perform there, and that was kind of interesting to watch a live television show.
Now, how'd you feel about that? Because there's a lot of different men.
Yeah.
Did you feel like they were, okay, here they come, here they go, or did you ever feel like one was going to stay?
To be honest with you, I had my own things going on, and I didn't. I liked Bernie. Bernie was a terrific guy. He was a good friend of mine. Some of the guys that my mom dated, were okay.
Yeah.
But Bernie was very creative and very funny, and he was he played in the Spike Jones band earlier.
Oh, wow.
And to be a musician in that band, you had to be top of the line, or you wouldn't even. And so, he was a very creative person, but for some reason, he was my mother was a hyperactive individual, and Bernie was even more hyperactive than she was, and I think it finally wore her out, and they, for whatever reason, they separated, and she started dating a guy by the name of Dale Watson, who was married. Bernie wasn't married, but Dale was, and it was one of those mistress things, I guess. But Dale was a very wealthy plywood dealer, and he was very kind to me, and even though the circumstances probably weren't correct, but he took my mom and I to New Orleans once, and we stayed for 3 or 4 days and ate at all the Brennan's and all the famous Antoine's and all the famous places, and ate all these really fancy meals, and it was, one time, and then when and Dale and her finally had to part because he was married and it wasn't going to work out. We vacationed in Lake Tahoe once during that period, and that was my whole high school period, like 3.5 years. We vacationed in Lake Tahoe one summer and we stayed for like a month or a month and a half. And she closed the shop down and just told everybody she'd be back,
Wow.
But she had a fantastic clientele, and they supported her and her. But anyway, we stayed there at Lake Tahoe. We had a lot of fun, and she met this professional gambler by the name, but believe it or not, his name was Bill Schindler. So, very close. But Bill was a nice guy, and he treated me well, and he would show me card tricks where he could deal from the middle or the bottom of the deck, and it looked like he was dealing from the top of the deck. You could never see,
So you were still in high school at this time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I went to a lot of different shows, and Bill took us to a lot of different shows. He would work for the house and actually, run a table or something. And then other times he would be, maybe next week he'd tell them that he would come back later, and he'd be off for a week, and he'd gamble on his own. He'd make huge amounts of money, and sometimes he lost it and he went back to work. But anyway, he would take us to all these shows. I saw Lena Horne
wow.
and Peggy Lee in person, and all that kind.
So what year would this be about?
Oh, let's see. I would have been about somewhere between 14 and 18. So I would put it at about 50. About 57, 58, 59, 1958, somewhere
wow.
in that area. And because I graduated from high school in '61, and I was 19 years old at that time. But so anyway, I left high school and I went to El Camino College for a semester, and I decided that I had friends of mine, high school friends of mine, that were members of Latter-day Saint Church. And one day, while I was waiting for I was 1 year ahead of Pierre, a friend of mine, and I was sitting at the house waiting for Pierre to come home. I finished my college classes at that time, and Pierre and I were going to do something. But anyway, Mary Lou Hathaway, Pierre's mother, was sitting there, and we got to talking about religion, and I was talking about a Church of Christ guy that was trying to get me to join his church, and I said, I asked him a lot of questions, and they didn't give me very good answers,
And you like good answers.
And I like good answers.
Yeah.
And so she started so I asked her about, what she believed in, and she started telling me what she believed in, and everything that she said made sense to me. And then she started quoting scriptures and reading scriptures to me, and I didn't know it, but she was reading out of the Pearl of Great Price, because I was a science fiction buff,
Yeah.
So she played on that, worlds without end and all
right.
that. Yeah, and so I said, that's really cool stuff. I'm going to get my Bible out, which I never read, It was just there on the bookshelf. He says, I'm going to get my Bible out. Where is that in the Bible? I was going to write down the scriptures. And she says, well, it's not in the Bible. And I said, what? And she said, well, these are Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint scriptures. And this is the Pearl of Great Price that I'm reading out, of the book of Moses and the book of Abraham. And I said, oh, is that anything like Seventh-day Adventist, or what is that Church Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint? She said the short name is we're Mormons. I said, well, I read about you guys in my history books. Mr. Hathaway, do you have another? Does he have a? I said no. She said no. That's. And she said we stopped doing that almost 50, 60 years ago.
And all this is waiting for Pierre.
And all this time I'm waiting for Pierre. Yeah, and Pierre got home, and I was so fascinated with what Mary Lou said. I said, go do your thing. I'm going to talk to your mom for a while. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So she got the lady missionaries to come visit me. We went through a couple of lessons. And then my mom found out. And my mom has never been particularly a religious person. She'll attend a church for a minister that she likes, the way he preaches or something. And she got really religious very quickly. It was almost an epiphany. She got that religious,
Religious in another faith against Mormonism?
Any faith. You name a faith, and she was... And she was really upset. She got a hold of my dad, and both of them... I talked with him on the phone, and he says, you're giving up your heritage. And I said, what heritage? And then she said, well, you're a Jew, And my mother says, you're a Lutheran,
And this was the first time that conversation had taken place, right?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. They, like I said, they both got religion very quickly. I was just impressed with their conversion, And so my mother and father decided. Now, of course, I'm like 19 years old at this point.
Right.
I'm of legal age.
Right.
But I don't have a job. I don't have any skills,
So you're going to college at this point.
Yeah, and I'm going to college. So I'm really under their jurisdiction, whether I wanted to be or not. Mm-hmm. And they decided I was going to go to San Antonio and live with my dad and my stepmother and my stepsister. And so off I went to San Antonio, and I went to San Antonio Junior College for 2 years, living with Mickey, Dad, and Leslie. And my dad's name is Zeb Tannenbaum. And it was, and I went ahead and I didn't graduate with an associate's degree, but I did graduate with what they call a certificate of completion. Mm-hmm. I had like 60, 70 hours of classes, and so I was scheduled, based on my everything. That I went on to the University of Texas at Austin. And
did you know what you wanted to study and what did you want it to be? Had that changed?
Well,
since you were little?
My dad was a businessman and owned a chain of junior department stores. He had 5 of them. He had a partner in New York who was the buyer, and he was the operations manager for the 5 stores. And of course, the main store was in San Antonio, and then there were stores in Calexico and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and stuff like that. I can't remember where all the locations were, but I remember those locations. So anyway, Dad and Mickey sent me off to Austin, Texas, to go to the University of Texas, and it wasn't a good situation for me. I did pretty good in my first year, but I was involved with a girl back in San Antonio, and I hadn't joined the church yet, but I'll tell you that story in a second. But anyway, I got involved with a girl while I was going to San Antonio College, and she was going to San Antonio College, and we slept together a number of times over that year, and she became pregnant, and she had an abortion without my knowledge, and so I was trying to, and she was going to go ahead and marry somebody else because she didn't want the connection for whatever reason, and I was trying to win her back, and I was very upset, and my brain got scrambled, and my emotions were going crazy, and I ended up failing most of my classes, and so I had to leave the University of Texas because of my grades were so bad. My head was so screwed up, and I went to work for the New York Life Insurance Company, and during that period I did join the church. I was visiting my mom one Christmas, and I was 20 years old, and it was in December, and I can't remember whether joining the church. My head was screwed up with Betty, and I don't know what. But anyway, I joined. What happened was I was sitting in the Hathaways' living room visiting them.
Oh, those Hathaways.
The Hathaways.
Yeah, those Hathaways.
Oh.
Those member missionary Hathaways.
Yeah, and I wanted to join the church, and they back at that time I had to be. The church wouldn't let, without parents' permission, they wouldn't let somebody join the church until they were 21. Oh. For whatever reason, and the Hathaways and I were talking, and they said, "You still want to join the church? It's been almost a year, And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to join the church." Didn't know anything about it. I never read the Book of Mormon except for the first few pages. But yeah, I was interested in the church, and I thought I'd like to join. And they said, "Well, we talked to the mission president, we talked to the stake president, we talked to the bishop, and they prayed about it, and the word came that they were prompted to say that I could go ahead and be baptized and confirmed a member of the church, but that I would have to keep it a secret for a year." They said if I wasn't baptized now, I would never be baptized. And so
because
of the parents' permission issue.
Oh, because they would never give it.
They never would give it. No.
Oh.
So I said okay, and I said, and they within 45 minutes they had me at the chapel. They had me dressed in white, and they filled up the font, and they had a high priest representative there, and Mr. Hathaway, which is now Brother Hathaway, Mr. Hathaway baptized me and the high priest guy, Brother Weir, confirmed me a member of the church, and told, and with the understanding that I was not to reveal my membership until I was 21 years old. So I came home to my mom's house, and a few days later I headed back to San Antonio for classes. And I kept my mouth shut for a year. There was one very attractive girl who was her name was Roxanne Hurd, and she was a modern dance gal. That's what she was learning at college, I guess. Anyway, she was a member of the church. I found out she was a member of the church. She was talking about the church one day, and I made a couple of comments. Not even thinking, I just made a couple of comments. And Roxanne is talking to one person, and she hears me make a comment, and she goes, like, boing, like a pointer,
So were you going to church?
No, I wasn't.
You weren't going to church because you were keeping it all secret.
Right.
And did you know what you were doing when you got baptized? I mean, were you continuing to learn, or you just...
I wasn't continuing to learn anything. I was completely void of any...
So was your baptism a spiritual experience or not?
No, not particularly, because I really didn't understand what was going on. I was pathetic. There was no promptings from the Holy Ghost during that period, and then after I started back to work in Austin, Texas, I started going to church, and it was a little chapel on Red River, and I worked with New York Life, and they were building a brand new chapel because we were out. The little chapel on Red River was too small for us. It was another church that we had bought, and it was cramped full. I mean, the cultural hall, which they called the rec hall back in those days, was opened up for Sunday evening sacrament meetings, and people were sitting on the stage. And, it was the main chapel was here, and the rec hall was here, and the stage was up here. So. Anyway, so we're building a beautiful new chapel on Old Torf near the Colorado River tributary in Austin, Texas. And I helped, in those days, members helped with the construction. They paid 30% of the building cost, and Salt Lake paid 70%. And we each had an assignment that we had to contribute, so much, and I had mine, and I paid. Anyway, the week before it was dedicated, I got a job in San Antonio with Roy's Coin Center, who was a college friend of mine. He was a coin dealer, and he had a really nice little business going, and he needed an office manager. He needed an administrative person to help him because he was getting buried. And he offered me really good money. And so I ended up going to San Antonio week before the chapel was dedicated. I never went in the chapel again. I never saw it again. And
now, what happened to Roxanne, and what happened to college?
Oh, nothing. Roxanne was just a casual acquaintance,
okay.
And she was just, that pointer.
Oh, yeah.
And I immediately realized the mistake I made, and I made some comments to deflect her interest. But boy, she almost nailed me, I'll tell you. But anyway, Roxanne was and she ended up, I saw her off and on over the years, just like I said, casual friends. I saw her off and on over the years, and she married a return missionary, a really nice guy. And believe it or not, his last name was Elder. Elder. Yeah, but
yeah.
Last time I saw her, she had 3 or 4 kids, and
So did you just decide about college? Well, I'm doing business anyway, so what do I need college for, or you just decided that wasn't the path for you?
Well, my dad was really aggravated with me and wasn't going to pay for my college anymore, and I understand why he was, and I was making really good money and having a really interesting life, and
Yeah.
And so I worked for Roy's Coin Center for about 3 years in San Antonio. Dated a lot of different girls, both in and out of the church. Roy and I were on the road a lot. We traveled all over the United States to various coin conventions, wheeling and dealing the coins. And
that's where your coin interest started?
That's where my coin interest and my knowledge came from. I learned a tremendous amount, and I kept that knowledge over the years. And I sold off most of my collection when I got married to Nancy Hasbrook. And I can't remember exactly when Nancy and I were married, but it was like 1970. I'd have to look it up. But anyway, so I had to sell off most of my collection because the responsibilities of marriage and children and my income wasn't great enough to support it. I was working by that time for Or Wheat Baking Company, and I was a salesperson. I had a sales route, and I was making pretty good money, but I wasn't making enough money to collect coins, And so anyway, I lost interest in it to some degree, though the knowledge stayed with me. And when I finally retired about 7 or 8 years ago, I started collecting again, and I still had the remnants of my collection. I had some Latter-day Saint Bishop Storehouse script from the turn of the last century, And so I built a collection up again, and it's a pretty nice collection. I think you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm losing track here a little bit. So anyway, I worked for Orwheat Baking Company. I'd married Nancy, and
So how old were you when you got married?
27, 28 years old.
And how old was she?
She was 8 years younger than I was.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
and she was an attractive blonde. At least she wasn't a natural blonde. I mean, if you saw her hair when it wasn't whatever she did to it, it was kind of a sandy color. It wasn't, but she made it set up so it was pure blonde,
So was she a member of the church or not a member of the church?
She was not a member of church when I met her, and I told her we couldn't get married unless she joined the church, so she joined the church. I don't think she ever really had a very strong testimony, but she was supportive and everything, and I baptized her and confirmed her a member of the church, and I was an elder by that time. And so anyway, I went on to, I was promoted to a supervisor, division supervisor, and I was transferred to Houston, and Nancy came with me, of course, and we had one child by then. We had Sarah, and so I was working in Houston. I was working at the main. We had depots in Houston, and we had one in Pasadena, and they were running short of supervisors, and I ended up supervising 2 divisions in that place. I was supervising 2 divisions, and I got a salary plus a commission off of what the routes were doing, and so we were doing very well, and I was getting paid very well. Nancy started going crazy on me. There was elements already. She was mentally unstable, and she would rack up $100, $200 phone bills talking to her mother on a weekly basis, and
so was this a sudden change of behavior or a continuation of the same?
It
where
was
you didn't notice it?
It was her behavior was a little off when we were living in San Antonio, but it wasn't enough for me to react to it in any kind of a negative way.
That was pre-baby, pre-Sarah?
That was pre-baby, and then baby, and then she started acting a little strange, and then when we got to Houston and she was away from her roots in San Antonio, she just went bananas. She started spending money like it was water. She'd buy baby clothes that Sarah would never get a chance to wear because there was just so much of it. We racked up some credit card bills that were stupendous, and then she started playing around on me. She started playing around on me with the New York Life agent that was our agent, George Hodges. He lived in San Antonio, but he would come up and they would go off together and have a little sexual interlude. And I finally found out about it. I'm getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm getting home at 7 o'clock at night when I'm working, because I have to stay until all the routes come in and have to get there before the routes, So I was working like a nut, and I had 2 days off, Sunday and Wednesday, and so anyway, I finally found out what was going on, and she wanted a divorce. And I didn't want a divorce because by that time we had Samuel. That was our second child, and I did everything I could do, or what I thought I could do to keep her, and she just wouldn't have any part of it. So George came and got her, and they left. And believe it or not, over the next year, she came back to me 5 times and left 5 times. And I told her the last time that she left, I said, Nancy, I love you, but emotionally I'm almost bankrupt, and financially we're almost bankrupt.
Yeah.
We can't do this anymore. you're coming back to me now, if you leave this time, I don't want you to come back. Every other time the door was open. I said, the door, if you leave me, I'm not going to leave you. And I said, I've made up my mind. I said, okay, I'm just telling you.
Did you have the kids this whole time?
No, she had the kids.
She had the kids, so she took the kids with her back and forth.
Yeah, and that was another thing that I was upset. She says, what about Sarah and Sammy? And I said, I don't want my kids going back and forth in this situation. They have to be one place, either here or with George and you. I don't, but this, the kid, when she left, she left for the fifth time. And I told her the door was closed, and she said she understood that she and George did. And she left, and I decided my mom decided to move in with me. She was in San Antonio. We thought we'd make a life together, and she'd help me pay off the credit cards and help me with the house payments. And she would work and I would work, So about 6 weeks later, Nancy calls me, and my mother's getting ready to come to live with me, and she's sold everything and she's ready to move. And I said, Nancy, I told you that the door was closed this time. My mother's coming to live with me. I don't want you back. And then she said, what about the kids?
Right.
And at that point, I said, they're on a teeter-totter, a roller coaster. They're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They don't know who their father, almost don't know who their father is anymore. I said that this isn't going to work, and the divorce was in progress by that time. And I said, and she just she went postal on me. She just was furious, and I said, I told you,
How old were the kids?
Let's see. Sarah would have been about 2 or 3, and Sam would have been about a year.
So very young.
Yeah. And so anyway, so that went on for a year or two, and I was in the Young Singles program, and I got heavily involved in the Young Singles program, and your mom and I were in the same ward. She was married to Dennis at that time, and I just had been divorced, and then one of my girlfriends in the ward called me, or in the ward stake, I can't remember, but anyway, she called me one day while I was at work, and she told me that Connie Tannenbaum and Dennis Nelson. Connie Nelson and Dennis Nelson were getting a divorce, and I said, "Really? I thought they were happily married." In fact, Ron McLean took me over to their house one time to help him with a home teaching situation because he didn't have a companion, and I thought they were happily married. And I had heard Dennis give talks once or twice, and I said, he's an impressive individual. Why would they be getting a divorce? That didn't make any sense to me. And I didn't think about it for a month or two. And then Connie started showing up at singles events, and she was divorced by that time, or had just finished getting a divorce. In fact, my mom had met her somewhere in the process. I can't remember. We still weren't going together, but my mom met her, and she says, you ought to date her more often. She's a very attractive woman. And I said, I would agree with you. I hadn't given it a lot of thought, but I do agree with you that she is very attractive. And then we were at a dance together for the first time, and I had and there's more men and there's more women and less men in the Young Singles program. So it was like one guy to every 3 or 4 women. And so one of the things that the kind of an unwritten code was that when you were at a dance, you danced with as many girls as you could, because that way the girls would have a chance to dance with her. And I did, and I enjoyed myself, and she was one of the girls one day, and I danced with her, and I thought, and I had never danced with, well, I had danced when I was in dance class at San Antonio College. I took ballroom dance, and I took folk dance and stuff, and I was in a folk dance club, and I danced with girls there that were, very good, But after that, from that period on, I didn't dance. I danced with girls that were okay, but they weren't as good as and I danced with Connie, and it was like I was back in San Antonio College. I mean, she was really good. I could tell. I mean, she anticipated everything that I did, and she was smooth and just. I knew that I was dancing with somebody special, at least from my point of view. And I started falling in love with her, and bless her heart, she started falling in love with me. And the next thing we knew, I asked her one night after a date. I said, "If I," and this is how I said it. I said, "If I would ask you to marry me, would you say yes?" I phrased it in that terminology, and
feeling out the waters.
Yeah, right. And she told me that she was thinking about dangling.
Wait.
Okay.
That was all you asked me that night.
Okay.
It was later on that you finally asked me to marry you.
Okay. But anyway, she said something that was generally in the affirmative. I don't know exactly what she said.
Something encouraging.
But it calmed me down enough to say, okay. But she was thinking about dangling me, really letting me dangle. And she was prompted by the Holy Ghost not to do that. And so she said yes. And so we got married. Your dad, or Dennis Nelson at that time, was absolutely furious that we were getting married. He was really upset because even though she had divorced her, the temple, there was no temple separation, and he was really, he told her at the time, he says, I'm not giving you a temple divorce, I'll fight it. And we got married anyway, and we got married at my mom's house. President Alfin conducted the marriage ceremony, and we started our life together, and I continued to work for Orweek, and it finally got to the point where it wasn't working out. It was putting pressure on our marriage, and I was scared to leave for another job. An ex general manager of Orweek Baking Company had gone on to start selling medical equipment and supplies, and he talked me into joining him. I got a really nice car, and I got a really nice salary, and so I started doing that, and I stopped. Eventually, I stopped working for him, and I started working on my own, doing topical hyperbaric chambers and other things like that. I worked for several companies. I worked for American Medical Equipment Company, and I worked for a company that's sold and serviced machines that put pressure on your legs to return your blood back to your heart for people that had problems in that direction. My mind's going blank on what the equipment was called, but it was kind of an interesting thing, and then I stopped doing that after a while, and I started working for a Prudential Insurance Company, and then I went as an independent insurance agent, and and while I was doing that, I was also working with a friend of mine in a vending machine business, and so I had two incomes coming in, and it was enough. It was enough for Connie and I to be comfortable, and we still had Adina with us. All the rest of Connie's children were old enough to leave the nest.
So what was it like walking into a situation with 6 children?
That was I had
more grown children.
I had a friend of mine, and I had a couple of friends of mine that really gave me a hard time about it. They said, "That's the stupidest thing, you know. Nobody, you know, marries a woman with 6 children, and you've got 2 children of your own that you're having to support." And they said, "Are you nuts?" And I said, "Well, I don't know if I'm nuts, but I'm in love." and to be perfectly honest, when I married Connie, I didn't really know the children that well. You know, they were kind of strangers to me. They seemed like nice kids. I'd never been around kids raising kids in my lifetime, so it was a completely new experience. And to be honest with you, I had trouble dealing with it for a while. And Dennis Nelson, who was their father, was putting a lot of pressure on them to make sure that I wasn't involved in anything in their life, you know. And Connie was trying to involve me with their lives, and Dennis was trying to, you know, keep me out of their lives. And I mean, he was dead serious. He wouldn't even when he was giving a blessing to one of the children, father's blessing or an elevation in the priesthood or something, I wasn't even allowed to be in the room, and Connie just would insist on that I was being in the room. You know, it was
a battle.
It was that bad, and it was very stressful for me, and I didn't know the kids that well, you know, and they were noisy and boisterous, and we get on my nerves a lot of times, and.
Well, you weren't used to growing up having a lot of kids around in your home.
That's right. It was like, you know, it was instant children.
Yeah.
And as the years went by, Dennis kind of backed off a little bit. And Connie was really upset. She was upset with me and with Dennis, you know, because she didn't think I was doing my part, and she was right. I wasn't. But I slowly, as time went on and the children got a little bit older and I started getting used to the whole thing, I started falling in love with the children, and I love my stepchildren just like I love my natural children. They're my children. They're part of me, and Dennis has backed off to the point where he doesn't interfere anymore. I've even helped him with blessings on the children from time to time, you know, and so he's backed off and mellowed, and I've gotten more involved with the children's lives, and Connie's happier about it, and I'm happy about it, because I consider that I have 8 children, you know, and because I love my stepchildren as much as I love my own children. It was a process. It didn't happen immediately, you know. It happened over the years, and I started. I got into business. I was still in the insurance business as an independent agent, but I wasn't making the kind of money I wanted to make, the vending machine business with a friend of mine had to be closed because my friend was no longer able to work, and I couldn't do it by myself, and so anyway, we closed the vending machine business, and I worked as for another vending machine company for a while, but and I was still an independent agent, but the income, it just was it was an unstable situation, and so Connie's middle daughter married a terrific guy by the name of Corinne Zunian, and they have 6 kids now, but one of them's on a mission. But anyway, Corinne got involved in what they call variable policies, annuities, which is a step between a regular insurance agent and a stockbroker. We were able to sell some types of financial vehicles, but we couldn't sell a straight stock. We had to sell it as an investment company of some kind, or a variable policy that's attached to an investment company, that does multiple dealings with multiple stocks.
So really, you've done a lot of different types of business in your life, a lot of different types.
Yeah, I have a broad experience in a lot of different things. Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you something. If there was any advice you could give to your children, your grandchildren, to help them in their lives, what advice would you give to them?
Well, the first thing I would do would be pray daily. And the next thing I would do is say, read the scriptures, and read all the scriptures, all the way through, as many times as you can.
Should they start with the Pearl of Great Price?
It doesn't make any difference where they start, but the important thing is they need to start,
Yeah.
And I think outside of my daughter Sarah, I think all of you, all the children, read the scriptures. My son, who's not a member of the church, and my daughter, who's not a member of the church, my son went to seminary and got his master's in theology. So he's a little bit disenchanted about organized religion right now, but I think he still believes, and I think he still reads the scriptures. Sarah doesn't, but she's a sweet girl, and yeah, and so.
She's Catholic now.
Oh, is she Catholic? I didn't know she was Catholic. Okay.
Well, isn't she?
I don't know. She's
Her husband is, and they're religious.
Yeah, she never mentions it, so I don't know.
Well, when we were there.
Did you hear her say that? Okay. So anyway, the next thing I would tell him, one of the things that I noticed when I joined the church, as I started reading the scriptures and I started praying, it was an evolutionary process, but I began to notice the promptings of the Holy Ghost. And by the time I was married to Connie I was getting promptings already. And by the time I married to Connie for 3 or 4 years, the promptings got stronger and stronger and stronger. And now I get promptings almost all the time, and I recognize what they are, and I try to follow them. And so I would tell them, with prayer and reading the scriptures, be sensitive to the promptings of the Holy Ghost, and the Holy Ghost will guide you and will help you make the correct decisions, better decisions than I could ever tell them to make. So I would say, listen to the promptings of the Holy Ghost, and follow those promptings, and have courage and steadfastness and trust in what the Holy Ghost will tell you to do.
Okay.
I remember one time when this is a famous story, Connie's heard it so many times, but I remember one time, we'd been married for 2 or 3 years, and there was some kind of a major decision that we had to make. And I told her, I says, well, this is what we're going to do. And she says, I don't think so. She says, I disagree with you. We're not going to do that. And I said, well, what do you suggest we do? And she says, I don't know, but we're not doing what you're telling me to do. And I said, okay. And so I prayed about it for 3 or 4 days. And I thought it through, and I looked at all the alternatives. And I didn't talk to her about it. I just went through the process, and I prayed that I would be prompted to do the right thing. And so one day I was prompted to go back to Connie and tell her that we're going to do what I suggested to begin with, but go back and do it as a suggestion, and not as a demand. Just I was prompted to just say I've thought about it and I prayed about it, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel that we should still go ahead and do it. And I went back to her and she said, okay.
Marriage.
Yes, but the Holy Ghost told her that was the right thing to do, and she told, because I prayed about it, and the Holy Ghost told me that it was the right thing to do, and to go back to her with a little bit more humble attitude about it, and the Holy Ghost didn't tell me what the outcome would be, but he said that's what I was supposed to do, so I did it.
Well, I think that's a good legacy to leave your children.
Yeah.
All of your children, right?
Yeah. Listen to the promptings of the Holy Ghost.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so anyway, that would be my advice to Sarah and Sam too, even though they might not understand what I'm trying to tell them. The other 6 children would, of course, and they do. And from what I can tell, they live those kind of lives where they listen to the promptings of the Holy Ghost. They pray and they read the scriptures. And if you do that, I think you're. And then so anyway, my health issues got to the point where I finally had to retire. So I retired about when I was around 65, 66. I went out, started getting Social Security, went on Medicare, and my health has remained pretty steady. Though I wasn't eating properly, and I wasn't taking care of myself the way I should. I wasn't exercising the way I should, and my health finally, against Connie's counsel, I did what I wasn't supposed to do, and I paid a heavy price for my lack of. And I guess the promptings of the Holy Ghost were there, and I wasn't listening to them. But anyway, I got very sick. I had diabetes. I had hypertension. I had lymphedema, which that's the equipment that I used to sell, lymphedema machines that would bring the blood back to the heart. And anyway, I got a pressure. Okay, I had a pressure sore, and I had heart palpitations. Found out I had renal failure, and I went into the hospital for 2 months. I was in rehab for a few weeks, and now I'm doing physical therapy on my own and with the help of a physical therapist, and I'm getting stronger and better. Still in a wheelchair, but I'll be walking soon, and I'm happily married to the most wonderful woman in the world, and she's taken good care of me over the years and tried to, and I've learned to appreciate her and love her even more than I started, and she's still beautiful to me. And I know my eyesight isn't as good, and I'm looking at her in fuzzy lenses, but I still see her beautiful because I think that her spirit has gotten stronger and brighter over the years, and I think I'm looking at her with spiritual eyes.
Okay, you have to do one more thing on this video.
Okay.
You have to tell a joke, but it has to be Rexburg appropriate.
Okay.
Any joke you want.
Okay. This one is
for the finale.
Okay. This one is about a little Jewish guy in Jerusalem who's very old, and he's kind of a legend in Jerusalem because he goes to the West Wall every day and prays. And a CNN reporter found out about him, and she wanted to do a human interest story about him. So she was sitting down with him and interviewing him, and had the camera rolling and everything. And she says, "You have a reputation for going to the West Wall every day and praying." He says, "Yes. 59 years, twice a day I go to the West Wall and pray. 59 years. And she says, "That's amazing." what do you pray about? What do I pray about? Well, I pray about peace between the Christians and peace between the Jews and the Arabs, and I pray about those kinds of things. And she says, well, in 59 years, there's been no peace with any of them. How do you feel about that? And he says, how do I feel about that? I feel like I'm talking to a frickin' wall. It went off just before the punchline.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think it's off, is it? Okay, let me check. I'll put it together.
Okay.
I think it was still on.